Alrighty. Hello everyone. Let me get myself organized and we will get started in a moment. YouTube has moved where certain things are for us creators, and I'm having a heck of a time finding the live stream once it goes on the new, what they call the beta creator studio. So I apologize for making you wait for a second, but I can't find it. Let's try this. In the meantime, as you see on your screen, you should get Reef Trace. It's a great app, and I highly recommend it. Why are they hiding the live stream so well? Okay, I think I found you guys. Thank you for the update on sound. Nice to know. Alrighty, I have a picture. That's a good sign. Let's grab this guy, and actually, let me just leave this just the way it is, and let me switch my other screen here so I can find my control center. Oh, I always waste like 2 minutes of your life. I apologize for that, guys. Here I am. And we will click on this guy right here. So, today's topic is going to be about alkalinity. And it's a really important one that occurs in all reef tanks. Matter of fact, it's a measurement of the lack of acidity or the abundance of acidity in your tank. And we want to keep our alkalinity somewhere between 8 and 11 DKH. So the important thing that you need to know about that is that it's got to stay between 8 and 11. That means pick a spot and live there. Don't say, oh, my tank is 8 today and 11 tomorrow, and then 9 the next day, and then 7.9. No, you want to be right on target, where it is measuring, let's say, 8.5, 8.6, 8.5, 8.5, 8.4, 8.5. If you like 8.5, park there. If you like 10, park there. That is the point that needs to be really established when it comes to maintaining a reef tank. With a fish-only saltwater aquarium, not so critical because fish don't really care nearly as much as the corals do. Corals are more picky or finicky in that regard. Now, if you're running a fish-only system and you hope to put corals in there one day, then you need to get used to measuring alkalinity. Many years ago, there was a poll that I read on a forum, and it said if you could only buy one test kit, and that's the last test kit you'll ever buy, then you would need to ask the, sorry, I had a phone call coming. Then the abundance of responses was I would buy the alkalinity test kit. And I was surprised. I thought salinity would be important, or phosphate, those seemed important. But alkalinity is key. And I can't emphasize enough how often you should be measuring it. Now behind me here are a couple of test kits. I've got the ELOS test kit here, which I use. And then the HANA checker, the alkalinity monitor. Super easy to use, and you're going to be seeing a review about that very soon. It's been out for a long time, but I'm finally getting around to my review. And it's really, really important that you stay on top of it because it gets away from you really fast. There are people, I just realized. Hang on. I apologize. Let's see if we can clean up this microphone a little bit more because I am just using the microphone in my laptop. Just noticed that. I was like, what? I did a mic test and everything. All right, we'll double check. And still good? Please let me know. Dumb mistakes. Live stream mistake. Let's call it that way. Anyway, you guys said that you could hear things, so that's good. I'm happy about that. All right, so if you don't test it frequently, the number can get away from you, and it's really easy to do. It's really easy to be lazy about that test, and yet it's one of the simplest tests we can do. When you are, matter of fact, while you guys are listening along, if you could type in what your current alkalinity level is or what you want it to be, I'd love to hear your numbers, because There is a club, I'm going to call it, or a clique of people that love low alkalinity. And man, 15 years ago, people were shooting for 14, 15 DKH on a regular basis for faster coral growth, especially when it came to SPS corals. So I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on that one, and if you like the high numbers or if you prefer to keep it down low. One of the things that crossed my feed recently on Facebook is that Fritz just released a new brand of salt. Their RPM brand was in I feel it was a blue box. You know, the ink on the box was blue. Maybe it was black. And the new one is red. And I love red, so of course it caught my eye. I was like, what's the red box? What's going on? And it said that, when I asked, they said the target DKH of the red formula is 10, which I love. That's fantastic. I was like, I can't wait to get my hands on a few boxes of that salt. So if you are concerned with having alkalinity that's too high in your tank, you should be measuring the salt brand that you use and make sure you're using a brand that keeps the number where you like it. If you're, for example, if you're in the 7.5 camp and you want your DKH at 7.5, then you need a salt mix that's around 7.5 to 8.5 every single time you mix it. Now, something else that happens with alkalinity every single day is your corals are taking it in. They're absorbing it to grow and become larger, and so your alkalinity level in the water depletes, and that's why we dose and we replenish it on a regular basis. There are people out there that don't dose at all. They do a water change once a week, and they feel that they are replacing the elements that have been taken, and they're not wrong, but if you were to measure alkalinity every single day of the week, you'd see it trending downward the entire time until you did the water change and brought it up, and then it would trickle back down again. That's not considered stability. Stability is when you have a very stable number all the way across. Imagine your heart rate being really high and then slowly going down lower and lower and lower, and then it's really high. I mean, how is that going to do for your body long term? And your coral reef will either thrive or it will stagnate based on what's going on with your alkalinity. So it's really important to stay on top of that one. And, over the last year and a half, 2 years, there have been some devices that have come to market that will measure your alkalinity all the time. One of the, trying to remember the name of course, I can never think of names when I need them most. There was a device that was designed by a guy over in China, as far as I know. Japan or China, I think China. And he came up with this device that would hook up to your tank, and you can measure 3-4 times a day. And based on those numbers, you could then tell your doser how much to add or not add to your tank until you dial it in precisely. Since then, other brands have come out. Alkatronic is out, which is a tester machine that does a lot of different testing. The Trident is coming out from Apex that will measure alkalinity, calcium, and magnesium. That's going to come out this summer, if everything goes well. And when that one comes out, it will not only measure those results and put them in your, in your app or your phone, but then it will even dose accordingly based on your own programming. Some people might not feel comfortable using a doser that's tied into their computer in that regard, to where, hey, it says it's low, so I better dose more, fearing that something can go wrong. And so they may choose to use the testing machine or the testing mechanism purely for data, and then they would manually make the changes when they're present in front of the aquarium. And that is, of course, another choice. Alrighty, let me jump in here really quick. I just want to see if there's anything important that I missed. Thank you for answering to the questions about DKH. Interesting, quite a few numbers are, well, it started off high and got lower and lower. We got people saying 10, 8.4, 8.5, 6.4, that's too low. You need to bring that one up. 8.5, 9.5, and 10.5. So, all right, why would anyone want alkalinity to be low? Let's discuss that for a moment, because there was a time about 4 years ago where people were just starting to use biopellets, and they discovered running biopellets in a high alkalinity system created a burn on the tips of the corals. So if you can imagine, this beautiful SPS coral, and then every single tip was burnt. I mean, the end was cooked off, no life, It turned brown very quickly, and then algae started to grow there. And the cure was to snip off the tip, cut, and then even put a drop of glue on top of all those cuts so the coral could heal over it just to fix itself. So that was a workaround for a problem that they soon discovered. If you lowered your alkalinity running biopellets, your tank would do better. And it's kind of hard to stipulate biopellets require it, because I run biopellets with very high alkalinity before. In the beginning I agreed. I told everyone keep it low, keep it around 7.5 or 8. But then, and others are like really locked in at 7. The ultra low nutrient systems, they like that low alkalinity. For those of us that like to overfeed our tank, and I am still horrible about overfeeding. Drives up my phosphate, drives up my nitrate. But you know what? I can have high alkalinity and my reef continues to, I'm going to say thrive. I don't know, there's flaws in there, but I mean, overall it's doing great. So I would say that if you're trying to run an ultra low nutrient system, you need to run at a lower alkalinity level. All right. The KH Guardian, thank you. That's the one that came from China. Now that is available through CoralView, which of course then sells to everyone like Marine Depot and BRS and Premium Aquatics and those types of websites. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, yeah, websites. Okay, so the Trident, someone mentioned it'll test 40 times a day. I hadn't heard that, but maybe you're combining all the tests together. But there are some people out there that would like to have a machine that would test their alkalinity 4 times a day, 8 times a day. They really want to know where the alkalinity is. Myself, I think I'd be really happy with a daily measurement. I'd love to get up in the morning and check my phone and it says today your tank is 8.5. And I can actually open a graph and hopefully, I assume there's a graph. And I can look at the graph and say, okay, yesterday was 8.4 and the day before was 8.3, so I'm on the rise. I might need to adjust it so it doesn't keep rising nonstop. Currently, I test once a week, or if I'm bad, every 2 weeks. Today, before I got on the stream, I did all my water tests. They're done. I've got my results already posted. I stuck them here on the community tab on my YouTube channel, and I put them on Instagram. So let me do this right there. So if you are doing your water tests on the weekends like I recommend, I ask you to always post your results on Instagram and use the hashtag post your results, hashtag water testing, and then at melevsreef so I can see it. Make sure that your pictures are public. If you're set to private, I can't see it, I won't see the tag. And none of us will see it. So the idea is that we are all posting our results and we're kind of keeping each other accountable. We're keeping each other on track so we're not blowing it off. Because a test kit typically has an expiration date. I know there's some brands that last forever, but bottom line is when you buy a kit, it's good for a year. And that means there's about 50 to 52 tests in the kit. You're supposed to use it until it gets used up rather than waiting until the reagents are dead. And, yeah, I've used old kits, and I felt good. My numbers are swell, and then I got my brand new kit, and my numbers weren't nearly as good because I used an aged, dated, used kit. So I would push away from that. I'd suggest always having a current kit. Matter of fact, it's best to have new kits every year. Also, some people like to measure different elements with test strips, where you just get the strip wet and then you wait for the color change. I really don't like those. I understand why they exist, but they're really not the best choice for our hobby. And you'll notice in the package it says, when you take out the strip, close the jar immediately. And I always wondered, why is that? And so I asked the manufacturer, why do you ask us to do that? And they said because the oxygen in the air, is deteriorating the test strips every time you open the jar. So if you have 50 test strips in there, or 100, and you open the jar 50 times, each time you've let in a little bit more air, and it's slowly just eroding those test strips. And if you leave them open, they're eroding automatically. So your results may not be accurate. So it's really important to stay on top of that. I really like the ELOS, super easy to use. The alkalinity checker costs a little bit more, To be honest, I need to look at the pricing. I don't know. But a lot of you own it. Feel free to just say here in the comments what it costs. I feel like it's 35 or 45 or 55. It's a very simple test where you just put in one syringe of solution and boom, you have results. Tropic Marin makes a kit if you can't get either of these that I like. Who else do I like? Saliferts isn't hard. That was another one that you could use. Everyone used to use Salifert in the old days. And it's still it's still available. Matter of fact, several of the fish stores I went to last month had Salifert on the shelves. So if you need that for alkalinity, I would do that. I'd steer away from test kits that just say they measure KH rather than DKH. So if you have a KH kit, you're converting the number. Just get a DKH kit. Usually you're looking at a kit that's $16 to $23 that lasts a year. And you should use it a lot. Don't just use it occasionally. Stay on top of it. Alrighty, let's see. I don't know that I can reset the stream other than exit and come back in. I could try that. Don't know if that would help us. I did. I had to plug in a microphone. It might have messed up the sound. Okay, let me back out and come back in, and hopefully this will just continue. And we're back. So I just threw that slide on the screen again. Reef Trace, great app. I'm a partner in it, so I have to push it. And I'm back too. Do you have any questions about alkalinity you'd like to throw at me? Feel free to put some in the comments here. That's why I'm here. Yes, my nitrates are at 50 right now. They've been at 50. It's not even news, so nothing to get worked up about. I wanted it to come down using the export brick from Brightwell, and that brick has been in there for 4 months, and I had no luck. They told me to add some other stuff to the water, like Microbacter 7 and reef fuel, and I did that. Hasn't budged. But it also hasn't gone up. And little known secret, I hardly ever do water changes, so if anything, nitrates should continue to build up, but they're not. So I have this crazy notion to mix up a ton of water, do a huge amount of water changes, and get the nitrates down where they belong, and then see if the brick will keep it there. But I was telling that to Sean from Fritz, and he says, "Are you crazy? Your reef is beautiful. Why would you mess with it? And doing all that would shock your stuff." He's kind of right. Plus, that'd be a lot of work. But anyway, yeah, nitrates haven't come down at all. It's kind of discouraging. I wish they'd come down. All right. Okay, so I told you replace your kit after a year. The best advice I can ever give you is when you open a kit, for the first time, grab yourself a Sharpie and write on there the date you opened it, the date you cracked open the bottles. And that way 12 months from that date it's done. So that's my trick for test kits. Another trick that some hobbyists do is that they will lift the lid and they write a cheat sheet of instructions, like you need 2.5 milliliters of water and 1 drop per DKH. They just glance at it, so don't have to open the instructions in case you don't memorize how the kit operates. With another kit, you might need to know it's 3 milliliters of water and it's going to be 20 drops of this, 1 scoop of that, that kind of stuff. You can do that. The ELOS has an actual infographic. It's a pictograph of how to do the tests. And then they have the microscopic instructions are super tiny font in like 7 languages, so you can read those if you'd like. Alrighty. Robert, I don't know why your brick works better than my brick, but my brick doesn't like my reef. But like I said, it hasn't let them go up. It just keeps them there. So that is the situation there. Today is May 5th. Most people call that Cinco de Mayo, but actually today is the day you're supposed to dose Prodibio. So if you are a Prodibio user like I am, make sure you dose your tank. I like to do it on the 5th and on the 20th of every month. I like to tell everyone else to do it on the same date just for fun. And so if you are using it, do it today. And one of the questions, so people ask me almost every week, do you still dose Prodibio? I'm like, yes. I have been dosing it since 2011 into my reef. It is something you add to the tank 2 times a month. Super easy to do, doesn't take long. And they always ask me, what do you use? Well, I use Biodigest and Bioptim. Those are the core elements. I also put in the iodine and the strontium. And the things I don't use as much, and I probably should, but I just don't, is the Roof Booster and the Coral Vits. Because both of those make my tank super crazy loud, and the skimmer has a hard time recovering from it. So I just, on the lazy side on my part, I just like, I use it randomly. I use it occasionally, every couple of months, like, okay, I'll do it. And that's the situation. So, all right. I felt like I had more stuff to say about alkalinity, but I really don't. My biggest thing is test it, test it, test it, test it. Okay, let me tell you a couple of things that have happened to me in regards to alkalinity, because things can go wrong in a reef tank. Your doser can go crazy and add all of your solution if you, in one session. Like, let's say you just hooked up a gallon of it to your tank, and then the doser went nuts. And this happened at the fish store right down the street at Frank's. They had this special machine, I can't remember what brand it was, of a doser, and you were supposed to update the firmware because it had a known defect that it could mess up. And Frank didn't update the firmware. And if I might have the story wrong, but this is how I heard it, so let's call it hearsay. The second pump, there's 3 pumps on there, the second one is the one that would fail. And most people put alkalinity on the first pump, calcium on the second one, magnesium on the third. Well, Frank did the reverse. He put calcium first and alkalinity second. If it had overdosed calcium, it just would have turned into a bunch of potato chips. It would have, become precipitant, and it would have looked like it was snowing in the tank, and it would have had, the calcium would have collapsed. But because it had alkalinity on the second doser that didn't have the updated firmware, it dosed all of it, and it shot the number up. I think he told me the tank got cloudy. I know they did a ton of water changes trying to save the tank before they lost all the corals. So he had to, do that to resolve it. Myself, I run a calcium reactor. And with a calcium reactor, it's trickling in alkalinity and calcium all the time, 24 hours a day. And I have controllers in place to activate it, to add more CO2 to the calcium reactor or not. And all I do is look at the trickle rate every single day, and then I glance at the CO2 tank to make sure it still has CO2 gas in it. That's it. And that maintains it. But if you don't measure your alkalinity and you've got something like that hooked up to your tank, either one, it can creep out of control and you're not even aware of it because everything in your tank doesn't really tell you until it's really, really upset. And in my case, I tested one time, 2 years ago I tested, and all of a sudden it was measuring 22 DKH. And I thought, well, that's not possible. Well, I'll retest. I did it wrong. And I tested again and it was 22.5. And I thought, that's insane. How could that be? So I went to my calcium reactor, and of course the first thing I did was I disabled it. And I stopped the CO2 going in so it would no longer melt the media. If you were in this situation, you would just stop dosing alkalinity whatsoever. That's what you're trying to do. Myself, I wanted to keep the water in the reactor turning. I didn't want it to, I didn't want the water in the reactor to stagnate. Really, really important. Whenever you take anything offline, remove it from the system or keep water moving through it so it doesn't stagnate. Because water just sitting there in a trapped container, when you finally restart it, will release all that toxic, low, well, let's just say anoxic fluid into your tank, and you could really cause, a cycle or worse. So it's very important. Any stagnant water always removed. But so I turned off the CO2. No more alkaline was melting. The pH in the calcium reactor matched, within an hour or two of what the reef was, and it was just water moving over the gravel, the media inside the reactor. And I let alkalinity drop gradually. Remember, I was at 22, and I waited, and around 16, which is probably like 5-6 days later, when it was at 16 DKH, I resumed the calcium reactor and kept it at 16 for about 3 weeks. And then I trickled it down again until I got it down to about 12 and kept it there for about 3 or 4 weeks. And then finally I brought it down to about 10. And my reef never skipped a beat. It was really weird because I would have expected such high alkalinity that all the LPS corals would crush down, look really tight, like cauliflower or something, and instead all the LPS were wide open and fluffy, and the fish were swimming right side up, and the SPS were growing, but the alkalinity was much too high for the tank. And so it took me about 3 months to get the number back down to where it needed to be, and then I maintained it. And then a year later, the same damn thing happened again. I could not believe it. It was up at 22 again, 23. So that time, I learned my lesson, and I got rid of that controller that apparently just decides to do whatever it wants once a year. And, you know, part of it was my fault because I wasn't testing. If I was testing every week, I would have caught it. But because I'd let it go by for 2 or 3 weeks, or 4 weeks, or 5 weeks, or 6 weeks, and finally I'd say, oh, I got to test, and I must test, I'm going to test today, and I finally did, I'd find these horrible numbers. That's why I keep telling you guys, test every weekend. And I'm telling you that because I'm telling myself that, so you get to enjoy my own internal battle. And again, it took me about 3 months to get the DKH down where it belonged. But my point is, having high DKH in your tank is not going to kill your tank. I don't want you to think, oh my God, it's 22, I got to get it down to 8, that's where I need it, and you just massive water change. Let's say you change 90% of the water, you just drain the tank down and you refill it and it's back to 8. Boom. That is going to freak out your corals and you will lose some. And in my case, you saw me take out last September the giant colonies. They lived through that twice and kept growing. So try not to overreact when you see a number that's way outside of your range, and find a way to get it back. Beth, I will answer your question here in a few minutes. Promise. Let's see. So what can go wrong with a dosing pump besides just overdosing and just spinning and trickling in nonstop? The other thing can go wrong is that the tubing that the liquid is coming out of can clog. And when that tubing clogs, nothing can get out. So even though the doser is trying to spin, no liquid is coming out, your tank isn't getting its dose. So you need to make sure those are unclogged. And the easiest way is just take the tube between your fingers, rub it tightly to kind of knock off any, let's call it calcification, that is trying to obscure the port. Another thing you can do is push the test button on each dosing pump and make sure a little trickle comes out on each one. And once you've done that with all 3, or 4, if you use 4 different dosing items, you're dosing 4 different items, then you're good to go. And that's an easy test you do once a week. Just make sure you see the liquid coming out of all 4 ports. Make sure all the reservoirs are filled up, or if it's time to mix up more, and get that back on your system. Most people that maintain a reef tank are dosing every single day. They may dose with a calcium reactor, they may dose with a dosing system, or they may just dose by pouring it in by hand, which is totally okay. For 2 years, I dosed my 29-gallon reef with a little tiny, what looked like those little plastic cups they have on the top of a cough bottle. You're supposed to drink 2 milliliters of cough syrup. Those little tiny dosing cups. And I would pour in my solution and I would trickle it in. And when you add anything like that to your tank manually, you got to do it very slowly. So if you need to put in, let's say, 20 milliliters of alkalinity into your tank, you don't just squirt it in. You don't just dump it in. You trickle it in very slowly for about 30 seconds in an area of very high flow. I usually look for the spot in the tank where the power head is blowing the water really firmly, and I pour in that spot so it's just mixing as it's tumbling into the reef. And I do the exact same thing with a calcium dose. And then if you did magnesium, the same thing again. If you're manually dosing, that's what you do. If you are dosing any other way, like a dosing pump or a calcium reactor, those rates are pretty much set by the device. So in that regard, you don't have to worry about it. But you do need to make sure that the effluent or the liquid coming out is coming out like it's supposed to, and that it hasn't failed you, or it hasn't flopped out of the sump and is trickling next to the sump on the concrete or on the floor or in the stand or in your basement somewhere. These are all things to know. Alrighty. I am going to stop there, and I'm going to go ahead and answer Beth's question. She wanted to know about dosing vodka and what does it do for your reef tank. So if you have more alkalinity questions, feel free to hit me. In the meantime, I'm going to address that question. Vodka is something that someone suggested many years ago, and people were trying it haphazardly. They just poured in and hope. They knew it was carbon-based, and they were trying to do something called carbon dosing. And that's different from using carbon in your reef tank to make the water more clear. So the vodka is added, and what it's basically doing is it is creating fuel in the reef for bacteria to consume, So let's say you have 1,000,000 bacteria in your tank and you add the vodka. Now you can have 1,100,000 bacteria, or 1,100,250,000. These. That's why I'm saying, the numbers can just grow and grow because you're adding the vodka, you're adding an extra amount of food, and the bacteria can colonize even greater and larger. And by having more bacteria, they're consuming the nitrate and the phosphate within the water. That's the goal. And vodka dosing was something that I held off on until I had the recipe. And then a couple of guys spent a long time and wrote this huge article about vodka dosing, and we published it in Reef Keeping magazine, and it's fantastic. And finally, I had this article in front of me. I said, I now have the recipe of how to dose vodka correctly. And I dosed it into my 280-gallon reef. And I was very pleased with the method. It was really simple, and it was very inexpensive. And you just had to put in a tiny bit every single day. And you had to stick to that schedule. You had to follow a spreadsheet, basically, where you were putting in a fixed amount, which when I started, you put in 1 milliliter per day every day for a week. And then you put in 1.5 milliliters per day for a week, and then you put in 2 milliliters per day for a week, and then you did 2.5. It took forever. And my tank took 7 months to finally have it kick in. And the article said you'd get results within 4 to 6 weeks, 12 at the most. And here I had been going for 7 months, and I was always in contact with the writer. And he says, Mark, I don't know what to tell you. I feel like maybe it's your deep sand bed is affecting this, and it's just taking forever to get going. But just keep going and keep adding that 0.5 milliliter more every week until we finally hit the tipping point. And it was amazing because at 7 months, I think I was up to, let's say, 37.5 milliliters a day, which is still not very much. And my nitrates were at 80, and they just dropped like a rock. And I was like, wow. I mean, it was like over that week, it just collapsed after all that waiting, all that buildup. It finally came down. It was fantastic. And the idea is that once you've brought the nitrate down, then you could cut the dose in half and it would maintain it and keep it there. And so I dosed vodka for about 3 years, and there's a vodka dosing article on my website, melevsreef.com, and /vodka_dosing, I think. And you can just put in the search box, it'll find it. And also in my article is the link to the original article if you want to read the full, the big story about how it works. Now, some of the benefits, of course, you get better water clarity, which is kind of cool. And there was an issue with growing some cyanobacteria when you use vodka dosing, so there is that. But getting your nitrates down where they needed to be was pretty much everyone's goal. And technically, I should be doing it now since the brick hasn't worked. And I might just do it. I know I've talked with a couple other reef keepers in my area, and they're doing vodka dosing. And now that we have dosing pumps, it seems like a great idea to do, provided the dosing pump doesn't go crazy and dump an entire quart or liter of vodka into your tank at once. That would be awful. That's where you might want to put in a week's worth in a very small flask. Yes, use a flask. Why not? That seems appropriate. And that way, even if it dosed all of it, it's just that little bit. And you can just refill that once a week and kind of keep your tank safe versus having a gallon of vodka next to your tank and taking the chance the pump might fail you. All right. Jay asks, is there a concern about too much bacteria when carbon dosing, like when you're using biopellets? I didn't run biopellets when I was doing vodka dosing. And by the way, vodka dosing is just one method. There's also vinegar dosing and there's sugar dosing. And some people put all three together and they mixed it up in their water. They called it VSV, vodka, sugar, vinegar. And that was their method of dosing to the tank. Some did it in their top-off solution. Others just dosed it separately. These are all methods that work. They're all considered carbon dosing. But I can tell you this, that if you put in too much bacteria and you have a lot of biopellets, you could have a really weird reaction, which did happen to me once in my tank many years ago. I did a video about it. TMGS, why doesn't macroalgae work for my nitrate control? Ever since I put that brick in my water, my refugium plants have just been dying back and dying back and dying back. It's unbelievable. And that's the only thing I can blame because nothing else in my tank has changed. I use the same food. I still don't change my water. And I had all these plants, and now I'm looking at it now. It's like maybe a third of what it was. It looks empty. It looks bad. I wish it looked better. I'm kind of wanting to just refill the reactor to the top and just go back to that. Or I want to go to vodka dosing. I really wanted the brick to work. I'm kind of disappointed. I expected great results because it seems super promising. And it was another of those things that works 24 hours a day. It's just in there fermenting in your sump, and the bacteria is colonizing it, and it's supposed to absorb, or I'm sorry, it's supposed to let the bacteria live there and consume that nitrate to denitrify your tank. That's the goal. That was what it's supposed to do, and it just didn't work. The one that I was using is the Export NO3 brick from Brightwell. I have not tried the Marine Pure brick yet, but maybe I should try that. I don't know. Maybe I should just do a water change or two. Okay, quickly, I just want to mention water changes because people that come from freshwater and then move into saltwater bring those habits with them. And freshwater people change their water all the time. They are the king of water changes. And saltwater tanks don't need massive water changes all the time. The typical rule of thumb that I've been recommending for a very long time, and it's how I even grew up with saltwater tanks when I was a kid, you change 25% of the water once a month. So I just talked with someone recently, and he was telling me how much water he was changing each week. And I said, mathematically, you're changing 60% of your water every month. And he had his RO system set up badly, and it wasn't working right. And I got it all fixed for him. But his water bill was $500 a month, and he had just grown to accept that bill. Where I have this huge reef tank, and of course I cook and I drink water all the time, and I shower and do dishes and do laundry and all that, and my water bill is $65. And his tank isn't as big as mine. So yeah, water was going down the drain because his RO system wasn't running right. And so I hope to have helped him get that figured out. So if your water bill's high, it's usually not because of the RO system unless the RO system is not running right. In other words, if you think it's off, but it's still dumping water down the drain line and it's not off, if you hear a hissing sound, that's not good. And if you have your RO system connected to a float valve and you expect that float valve to turn off your RO system, I'm going to politely say you're in a dream world. That is not how those work. I know because I sell RO systems for the last 15 years. Buy one now at melevsreef.com. And I want to tell you, it's really important that you put a ball valve on the end of that line. Use the float to keep your floor dry. And once you see it's full, close the ball valve so it shuts off the RO system. If you want to be doubly safe, close the feed going to the RO system as well. So that way no water goes in or out of it until you deem it necessary to turn it on again. So I want to recommend that. Okay, Travis, you and your $25 water bill a month. You must live in a shoebox. All right, what else? That's it. If your alkalinity is bouncing around or if you never measure it, I need you to start measuring it. It's really, really important. Put your numbers on Instagram. Boom. I'm going to put that on the screen one more time. And hashtag water testing, hashtag post your results at melevsreef. Please do that. And if you are looking to find me on Facebook, this is the link to where you can find me. I mentioned this last week. I'm just going to remind you, there's no point following me on Facebook as myself, as Mark Levinson, because I'm not accepting new people. So you want to talk about reef-related stuff? That's the link you want to click on. Finally, I just wanted to thank you guys for following along in these live streams. I know you're really enjoying them. I've got numerous videos to roll out. I might just knock out a few of them this week. I don't know if you get a lot of videos, but I might just bump some out because I need them off my hard drive, and I got to do it. So that's all in the works. And something I rarely ever do, I joke a little bit about buying things for my website, but I do. I run an online business where I sell things for the reef keeping hobby. And if you buy things from my website, from melevsreef.com, which I greatly appreciate, it helps keep me fed, it helps keep Spock fed, and it lets me keep making these videos. So it's not that you have to, and some of you already do it, and I appreciate that. It's just a gentle reminder. I appreciate any business you throw my way. It's always it's a good thing. Good thing, keep me fed. All right, guys, let me see if there are any questions I can answer finally. A hashtag is the £. And it is hashtag water testing, hashtag post your results. Let's see. Oh, LJ's Reef asked really quickly, what is the ideal alkalinity number? And I would say somewhere between 8 and 11. I mentioned that at the beginning of the stream. So pick a number in that zone, pick one spot, and stay there as best you can. So if 8.5 is your number, be at 8.5 day in, day out, week in, week out, every month, all year long. Let's see if I can find your question. Cool. I'll scroll up a little bit. Maybe I missed it. I don't see it. If you can ask that question again, I would be happy to answer it, I think. I'm sorry. Kui Tran asked me to answer his question. I was trying to, but couldn't find it. You can run a lower alkalinity number somewhere between 7 and 8 if you're running biopellets. But I have run biopellets with higher alkalinity and had no ill effects. So I'm kind of getting away from that belief you have to keep it low to run biopellets. 2 more questions. And then we all go on to our day and we do things, like me. I prefer higher alkalinity. I like to keep it around 10. And I measured my numbers today and it was at 8. So I have adjusted my calcium reactor's melting point to make it a little bit, to make it melt faster, to release more alkalinity, and that will then bring the alkalinity up on the tank. I might have to put some more media in the reactor too. Thought on Triton or 8? I don't know what you're asking. Sorry, Travis. Oh, ATI. You're talking about test kits or what? I don't understand the question. I can't even say the name. Acid to Block Shifty asks, hey, I'm going to break down my tank probably next weekend. Any pointers? I have lots of aptasia and probably have to pull the rock to get the fish out. Should I plan on not getting done in a day? You could get it done in a day if you had a helper. It also depends what size your tank is. If you're doing a 29-gallon tank, yeah, you can do it in a day. If you're dealing with a 240-gallon reef, you're still got to do it in a day. Livestock is on the line. You know, everything's alive, so you're going to have to work. It's just you're going to have to stay on it nonstop. Alrighty, guys, thank you very much. I'm going to wrap up here. I hope that this was informative to you. I hope that you will measure your alkalinity more than you have in the past, that you are more motivated, because this is a really important number to know. And when people ask, you know, when you say, I have a problem with my tank, the first thing people are going to ask are, what are your parameters? And you are not allowed to say they are fine. You are supposed to give us real numbers and give us some information. And what's the latest information? Thanks, guys. LJ, real quick, yes, I do sell baffles on my website. Go to the shop area, click on the acrylic section. You'll find the different baffle kits that I sell. All right, guys, that's it. Have a great weekend, and I will see you guys.